This episode of The Shift is sponsored by LinkedIn. As a B2B marketer, you know how noisy the ad space can be. Well, it's time you had a marketing platform built specifically for you. That's LinkedIn Ads, the platform where you can cut through the noise by precisely reaching the professionals who are more likely to find your ad relevant. Target your ideal audience by job title, industry, company, and more. Stand out with LinkedIn Ads and start converting your B2B audience into high-quality leads today. LinkedIn Ads allow you to build the right relationships, drive results, and reach your customers in a respectful environment. You'll have direct access to and build relationships with decision makers, 1 billion members, and 10 million C-level executives. You'll be able to drive results with targeting and measurement tools that are built specifically for B2B. In technology, LinkedIn generated 2 to 5 times higher return on ad spend than other social media platforms. And you'll work with a partner who respects the B2B world that you operate in. 79% of B2B content marketers said LinkedIn produces the best results for paid media. Throughout my career on magazines, digital media, and now podcasts, LinkedIn has been invaluable. It's given me direct access to people and ideas that have helped shape the Shift podcast and newsletter and seen it grow into the thriving hub for midlife women that it is today. Stand out with LinkedIn Ads and start converting your B2B audience into high-quality leads today. We'll even give you $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/theshift to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/theshift. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Most tax pros leave a message.
It's Jane. I'm moving on to a TurboTax expert who beat your price. Adam Devine, tell him how I feel.
Hey, tax pro, she's been thinking twice. Best believe TurboTax will beat your price. This is a tax break.
Switch to a TurboTax Live expert and we'll beat what you paid your pro last tax season. Make the switch at turbotax.com/beatyourprice. TurboTax full service only. Sign up by 12/20/2024 and file by 4/1/2025. Full details at turbotax.com/beatyourprice.
Hello and welcome to The Shift, the podcast that aims to tell the no-holds-barred truth about being a woman post-40. Created and hosted by me, writer and broadcaster Sam Baker. My guest today knows a thing or two about being single, and she's here to tell you that there's more than one way to live an emotionally fulfilling life. Marianne Power is a journalist who made a perfectly decent living testing things so you didn't have to. Mascara, spa retreats, you get the gist. Until the decision to spend a year testing self-help books changed her life in ways she'd never expected. The resulting book, Help Me, has since sold hundreds of thousands of copies, been translated into 25 languages, and been optioned for telly. Clearly, something about her funny, candid, but vulnerable approach struck a chord. As she turned 40, Marianne still had questions. Namely, why were all her friends merrily ticking boxes on the life to-do list, and she wasn't? Love eluded her. So, she decided to try the same approach. In Love Me, she looks at society's obsession with marriage, kids, domesticity, and whether you can love and be loved without them.
It's actually very hard to know what you really want versus what society tells you you should want, because we are swimming in it. From the minute we're told, fairy tales and watch TV, it is almost impossible to know who you really are in all that.
I met Marianne in London to talk about rewriting the stories we tell ourselves about love and sex, and why there's more than one soulmate for everyone, and no, they don't have to be sexual. We also talked anxiety, growing up ginger, navel gazing, tantra, and, the kicker, why sex is not a reward for being young and hot. Well, let's start with your upbringing and what little Marianne was like. So I love getting the perspective of the the interviewee now,
Yeah.
and what their little self was like, and what the world was like that they were brought up in.
So I was brought up to Irish parents in Surrey. So kind of basically what feels like the most English part of England.
Oh, so they don't live in Ireland?
No. So we were brought up in Surrey. Dad came over from Ireland when he was 16, literally left home on his 16th birthday and got the ferry to London and made his way. And Mum had come over in her 20s. So me and my sisters were born and brought up in Surrey while always being told we were Irish. Never, ever, ever to say you were English.
So you weren't even, it wasn't even a part of London with lots of...
No, other Irish... No, it's really home counties.
Yeah,
and
really? So how many sisters have you got?
2 sisters.
And where are you in...
I'm the oldest.
Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Why?
Well, because I was trying to... I'm one of the many things that obsesses me is like the character traits of your different role in the family.
Yeah.
But I wonder if having sisters is different to having a brother.
Sure.
In that. So what was your role in the family? You were the first.
I was the first, and probably if I see pictures of me as a baby, I'm really smiley. And then at some point, I think it's when you sort of start school age, I always look quite serious. So I think I was quite a worrying type. And this penny only sort of dropped recently when my friends started putting their kids to school, that I was really young for my year at school. I hadn't yet turned 4 when I started school.
Wow.
And
so when's your birthday?
It's September, end of September. And I started at the beginning of September. So I was 3 going on 4. And
oh, wow, really?
Yeah, yeah. And
your mum was like, chop, chop.
Kind of. No, kind of, though. And because I was quite bright, I was also then skipped a year. So they put me up a year. Already I was really young. And then I was put up an extra year. So I think when I look back on my childhood now, I realised that there was just a lot of fear all the time of not quite being good enough or kind of confident enough as all the other kids, and especially in teenage years, I was always this feeling of like being out of my depth.
Go all the way through. So
I think so.
Basically 12 in a class with 14-year-olds.
Yeah, it would have been 13, 14. They were, so I was a good year and a chunk younger than most people in it, which when you're at that formative age is quite a big difference, isn't it?
But I think, and I can say this as a fellow ginger
who
grew up in the south of England.
Yeah.
Where truly there were very, 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 very few gingers.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there were 3 in secondary school. There were 3 in my year.
Yeah. God, we didn't have that many even, I don't think.
Yeah, 300 kids in a year.
Oh, wow,
one other girl
year.
and a bloke.
Yeah.
A boy.
Yeah.
And the kind of message I got was like, oh, well, just be glad you're not a boy, because it's worse if you're a boy to be a ginger.
Yeah.
And it was a source of, I don't know, like, I don't want to say shame, because shame is too big a word, but I just always felt like a bit other. And obviously being ginger, it's not other in a serious way, but you aren't the same.
Yeah, it's true.
And I don't want to put this on you,
go on.
but you aren't like pretty.
Yeah,
You aren't a
definitely.
pretty little blonde girl.
You're not a pretty blonde girl called Sarah. That was always what I had in my head. Yeah. And I think that's part of what's gone through lots of my writing still, is this sort of trying to be normal and knowing I'm not normal. But then sometimes I love not being normal. And then realising the whole word normal is such a stupid concept anyway. But I do remember that at school. We came from a kind of eccentric Irish family. I was a redhead in a sea of Sarahs and Lucys and normal people.
Are your siblings gingers?
No. Well, actually, it's a lie. The youngest sister was red and has now let herself go this amazing kind of platinum colour. She went into that zone, she looks gorgeous. And my middle sister is brunette. Yeah, I don't think either me nor my little sister liked being red when we were younger, but I love it now. Just took ages to kind of believe what lots of the adults said, which is like, you'll like it when you're older.
Oh my God, so much that. And I used to think, I don't give a flying fuck
I
about
know.
when I'm older. I hear about now and I hate it. I just want to be blonde. And also it's not just the colour, it's the consistency.
Yeah.
The texture, this kind of like big wiry, you know, kind of with waves in all the wrong places and just, you know, all I really wanted was nice straight.
And it was
blonde
before
hair
hair
and a flick.
straighteners.
Yes, way before hair straighteners.
Yeah.
So you didn't feel like a pressure to be a good girl from your mum or dad, or?
The good girl would probably have come a little bit from mum, in that I saw her as a good woman. You know, like mum was a really good person, did the right thing by everyone. Dad was the opposite. He was a rebel. He'd have told us to, you know, tell everyone to fuck off. But yeah, my nature, I just think there's just, you know, I guess a combination of things goes on, doesn't it, to make you whoever you end up being. And my nature tended to be quite a sensitive one that was always worried. And I remember mum asking me that in my 20s once, because it would have been, you know, another time when I got a really big job and was making myself sick with stress, which seems to be a pattern that I go through again and again. And, you know, and there's never anything being good enough. And she was like, Marianne, where does this come from? And we were in the kitchen. It's like, I don't know. So I actually don't know. Yeah.
Can't think of like I don't want to therapize you, but you can't think of like an incident when you were a kid or anything that
really
not.
Mind, really not. There was never any time mum and dad pressured us to do anything. I always got really good marks. There was no particular mean teacher, although, you know, they weren't a joy, but they weren't mean.
What about the other kids?
The kids were nice, actually. Different in that they were English and we were Irish. And it's so funny that makes a difference, and it makes a difference. And I guess maybe when you're younger, any sort of differences seem quite interesting. So it was a private school, but they're kind of low-end private school where they were kind enough not to get annoyed when we couldn't pay the fees for years. You know, it was like the entry level, run by nuns, and they were Irish Catholic nuns and we were Irish Catholic families. So I think they were very, very forgiving with us. And mostly the other kids were English. It was a girls' school, and there would have always been probably a bit of cliquiness that goes on in girls' schools. And I think I was always lucky in that I wasn't necessarily in the cool gang, but I was very happily in their orbit. I would have been allowed around the cool gang, but never, you know, wasn't ever one of them. And yeah, I'm still friends with Nadia. I'll give you a name check. Nadia, who I started school with. So she'd have been 4 and I would have been not yet 3. Yeah.
Yes. And I apologise if this is wrong, because I do read so many books that I could have easily made a massive mistake. There's a bit in Help Me, I think it's when you're doing rejection therapy.
Yes.
And you talk about asking 2 little girls if you can play with them, and them saying, can you go away while we discuss it? And then I'm coming back and going, not today, but maybe tomorrow. And I just thought, oh my God. And that rang like way too many bells for my liking. But I did just think, oh my God, that kind of like is such a tiny little rejection. It meant nothing to them, but it's also huge, isn't it? Because the next time, how many times does that have to happen before you stop making overtures?
Yeah. But do you know what happened in that instance was, I think the next day they did let me play with them. And again, you don't know how much your memory is sort of making things up. But my memory is they did want me to play with them, and I did play with them, and then I was quite bored. So
see, you're I've having listened to Help Me yesterday and read Love Me. Such an interesting mix. You come across
Sam, analyse me, because I can't tell how I come across, obviously.
You come across as such an interesting mix of being like, I don't want to be different, and I want to fit in, and I want to be normal, whatever normal is. But actually,
that's true. That's true.
It's so interesting.
That's really true. And whenever I get accepted into the normal places, or like whenever, you know, I got the boyfriend, as soon as I had it, and I was like, oh God, I hate this. And so it's true.
What did you hate about it? In particular, or the situation?
The situation. No, so this is all part of what's explored in Love Me a lot. No, I've had lovely men in my life, or, you know, young men in my life. And it was always a situation that made me feel trapped and suffocated.
You look even tense talking about it.
I do.
Literally gone all rigid.
Yeah, it's a really extreme reaction. So yeah, it's true. There's this kind of definitely a contradiction of this quest to be normal, while deep down being a very, very free spirit who wants to run for the hills if ever I'm in a situation that's approaching kind of normalness.
So because it's like timeline that society says we're meant to live by is so rigid, isn't it? And there's like this real sense that, well, so many people say it's like it's all of a sudden all your friends are getting married in their 30s and then they're all like having children, trying for children, and there's just that kind of, if it's you're not in that place or you don't want to be in that place, then it's
lonely,
wrong.
Yeah.
Do you think, because you're very happily single, aren't you?
I think so. Yes.
Singlish. We'll talk about
Singlish.
that.
We'll talk about it. Yeah. So it's funny. Even all these labels that we have. You're single. You're married. I'm a human who goes through lots of different phases of lots of different situations. So I don't even relate to the term single, even though technically I would be single.
No.
Again, it's probably this non-conformist bit that wants to just wriggle out of labels.
But it's like I think you mentioned in Help Me This, you're either single or you're with a partner or you're trying to be with a partner.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're single, you're trying to be with a partner.
Or you're meant to be, and people are very confused if you don't seem to be doing that work. It gets easier in your 40s though. I'm 46 now. And it feels to me like once you kind of go over the 40 threshold, people stop asking and it's actually a huge relief.
That's to do with babies.
It's to do with babies. Yeah.
I mean, you're, I hate this phrase, you're child-free by choice, aren't you?
Yes.
When did you decide that you didn't want kids?
I don't think it was a decision. It was just the wanting was never there. And it just was never there in the way that my friends from like late 20s just seemed to know that's what they wanted. And especially by early 30s, that really just hit in and everything was sort of heading towards that direction. And I never had that wanting. And I used to put it down to the fact that I was not in relationships and maybe, if I met someone, then I would want that. But the wanting never came, and being with someone that I wanted the children with never came. And I remember being told when I was about 36 by a friend that I'd wake up at 40 and it would be like a bomb would go off and I would just want kids, because that is what had happened to her. She'd been single also most of her life. And then at 40, she was like, oh my God, that whole idea of ovaries exploding, all these kind of phrases. That's what happened to her. And I was fully waiting for that to happen. And it just never did. It never did. And I'm really grateful for that, because with friends who aren't with someone who really did want to have children, it's a really tough path to figure out whether you want to try on your own or can you live with not having them. And so I'm just so glad that none of that craving came up. But I spent quite a lot of my 30s sort of imagining it would, and the fear of, you'll wake up and you'll have left it too late. And of course, that could still happen. I'm 46, but it hasn't happened yet. Yeah, if anything, I really feel very grateful that I didn't end up trying to force myself down that path, because I'm not sure it's the one I'd have been the most suited to. And I think I'd have done a good job, like I really do. And I genuinely love kids. You feel like all child-free by choice people have to go, but I love kids.
Yeah, exactly. But you have to.
I'm not. I'm not Satan.
You're not Cruella de Vil.
Exactly, and I'm not. And it's also fine to say I'm not into kids, but I quite like them, and I'm sure I'd have been a decent mum if that's what had happened. There's no bit of me thinks that's what I should have been doing. Sometimes I catch myself now in this, quite messy, financially precarious life I have. And for all the stresses of it, sometimes I really envy people in partnership, because you've got shared finances, which of course can be a disaster, but it could also be a relief. But I often catch myself in my imperfect life having some random chat with my neighbour, or, going to the coffee shop, and often catch myself thinking, this is just exactly the life you wanted. It really is these tiny moments. And maybe if I'd have had kids, I would have felt that too. I'd have fallen in love with my baby and just thought, oh my God, there is nothing more important than this. And maybe that's the gift of life, that actually very often, whatever path you go down, you can end up with the right approach, seeing the beauty of it. But I do have friends that really wanted kids and that didn't happen. And that is a really, really tough situation. So I'm glad I wasn't in it.
You're being very glass half full.
Am I?
Yeah. It's interesting. You talk in both books. You talk about money,
Yes.
And I love talking about money.
Oh.
So many women don't want to talk about
Yeah.
money. They don't feel comfortable talking about it. But what's your relationship with money?
It's a terrible relationship. Yeah, it's really terrible. So if I have the capacity to do another book, it will be about money. So love and money were the two big things that I did not get a
Help me,
handle on.
love me,
Pay me. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the idea, but my brain is so tired now. I don't know if I have it in me, but yeah, I'm terrible with it. I really am. And I keep repeating the same cycle, which is, I've always worked hard. So sometimes I can earn good money, and then I earn that good money, and then it just seems to go poof. I don't know where it goes. It just goes. And then I start again, and then I start again. So I'm 46, I'm living in a rented flat, no savings, none of that security that I would really like to have. And so there's definitely work that needs to be done around money.
So I was listening to you read Help Me yesterday, and on the chapter where you're doing The Secret, the Rhonda Byrne book, like massive eye roll. I was thinking, and then I was reading the press release and thinking, you did an 11-way auction for the TV rights for Help Me.
Yeah.
So maybe Rhonda was onto something. Was that where the £100,000 check from your mood board came? Did it come from?
But it did. So this is the thing with The Secret. The head wreck of The Secret is that you read it and just go, oh, for God's sake, this is absolutely deluded rubbish. And then another bit of me goes, oh, but maybe. And so I put the £100,000 blank check on a vision board. And one way or another, through Help Me, I did get that money. And another incredible thing that happened was that on that vision board, I had a picture of Cheryl Strayed's Wild, the book cover. That book cover had a photograph of a boot that Cheryl had gone walking. Had gone walking the Pacific Coast Trail on. And I had that book there because I just read it. I really loved it. And Reese Witherspoon had optioned it for a film. And so, of course, that would be the dream, that you would write a book and Reese Witherspoon would option it for something, or someone would option it for something. And I ended up, after Help Me came out, in LA for TV meetings, including one in Reese Witherspoon's office, where those boots, that actual boot, was in a Perspex box on the desk.
Oh my God.
And so that properly gave me but that really, how the hell could you ever orchestrate a situation where the actual boot that was living on a vision board in North London, you're sitting in front of it?
You've got to believe.
Maybe. So then, who knows? The world is full of things, more things that we understand.
The thing that's really clever about The Secret is you can post-rationalise it, can't you?
That's true.
Just say your $100,000 will come. It's not a check that's coming in the post tomorrow, but ultimately it came.
But also, ultimately, I spent 4 years working on something really hard.
Yeah.
So
which is $25,000 a year.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so this is this. Yeah. So, but yes, but also it did come. Yeah.
So anyway, when you started writing Love Me, you were basically 40, no house, no savings, no pension, no husband.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the start point for Love Me?
The start point for Love Me picks up from the end of Help Me. So in Help Me, I spent a year living by self-help books and I picked a different self-help book each month, and I did everything they tell you to do.
Spectacularly entertaining.
Oh, thanks.
Really,
it was a funny book. I reread it back now, and it was a good book.
But really exposing too.
Of course. Yes.
Yes. Was it more exposing than you expected?
Yeah. Because I'm a journalist, and so I was always reading self-help books, and I had this idea that I thought that if I read the self-help books and made myself write about it, that it would make a really clever book, because it would be like the best bits of the self-help books all combined into one book. And I'd try and make it funny and entertaining. And what I honestly didn't appreciate was how intense and how emotional it would all end up being, and that I would write about myself as openly as I did end up writing about myself. So I always wanted to write a book with it, but I didn't imagine it would turn out how it did.
So much about you.
Yeah. And I'm really proud of it.
Yeah.
It was never, I never felt, oh, this is too much, because once the book came out, all I had was people going, I've never read something that I saw more of myself in. So then it kind of felt fine, because all these things I was admitting to, all my failings, all I ever got was just like, me too, me too, me too. Yeah. So I thank God I never had that moment of going, oh my God, why did you say that? Everyone thinks you're an idiot. And if those people did think that, thankfully they didn't come and tell me. They went off in their own world and went, what the hell is she going on about?
No, but they would have told you, because that's what people do now. They tell you how much they hate your hair, or how arrogant you are, or what did your family think about all this massive self-exposure?
Navel gazing. Oh, the self-exposure.
Navel
gazing went through the process. Yeah, they were not into it, obviously, because they're quite normal people, and they're like, what the hell is she doing?
There's a moment, though, and I think, again, I can't remember which book it's in, because I've read both in such quick succession, where your mum is basically, I can't remember your mum says it, that she wasn't brought up to
contemplate her toenails.
Yeah. And I really love that, because I could really identify it. But I think that probably neither of us really come generationally, I'm 10 years older than you, from backgrounds where, like, opening the can of worms, washing your dirty linen,
not at all.
Navel gazing is what you do.
No.
It's not what you do.
No.
You just get up, put on your lipstick,
and get on with it. And my God, aren't you lucky? What have you got to complain about?
Exactly. How dare you be depressed?
Which is also, I do understand it. Like, mum was born in 1946 in a farm in Kerry in Ireland. How different is it from the world that I've been born into, and the time,
and complaining about across 80,000 words.
Yes. No, but seriously, because that is that's always like a question of, like, there is a line when sometimes, obviously, you just get on with life and live it and count your blessings and all that lovely old-fashioned stuff. Count your blessings, get on with it. And then there are other times when I think it's pretty great that we're examining and trying to figure out what we really want, or what's really making us behave in these ways that's so unhealthy, and we keep doing them again and again, and I think we are in a time, and you could totally argue it's gone too far, but we are in a time and a culture where that self-examination seems to be in the air, and it might be that we're in that time where that's, as humans, maybe what might be helpful for us to be doing in terms of evolution. And if you read or speak to the kind of very spiritual people, they will say that we're doing healing for the generations behind us and for the generations ahead of us. And, there might be something in that. So, what I was doing was absolutely incomprehensible to my mum and dad. They were just like, honestly, what is this? And when I told Dad, I told him all the stats about how self-help was a huge industry, and I was going to write a book and it was going to be really good. And then he was like, all right then, so that he could get the kind of business end of it. Yeah. And then with Mum,
it wasn't self-indulgent, it became work.
It was exactly. And I think that's probably a lot of why I do things through writing the way I do, because then it's partly work. Well, it is work, and me too. Mum's just, she would say these very funny things, which ended up being most people's favourite part of Help Me. So I think she's in about 25 out of 300 pages. And around the world, people have told me to say hello to your mum, because they were her favourite. They were most people's favourite lines. So my mum has a way of being very funny and very cutting in one, like I explained.
She's like the Greek chorus.
She is. Yeah. This is it. And she's also, she's a really good character for that, but she's also obviously a good mum for that, in that she voices all the things that need to be said that perhaps your friends won't have the guts to quite say to you.
So what did she say when you said to her, oh, not only am I gonna pick my toenails some more, I'm going to write, the toenails I'm going to be picking are going to be all about sex.
Well, the opening of Love Me is a little conversation between me and Mum, where I said, I'm writing another book and there's going to be sex in it. Is that okay with you? She was like, yes, I've watched normal people in sex education write what you want. And I was like, oh, great. I thought you'd be embarrassed. And she said, you're not writing about yourself again. Haven't people had enough of that? And it just went,
no one's looking at you.
We talked about it afterwards, and I think Mum's concern is always for me, in terms of, she saw with Help Me how intense of a process it was, the whole actual doing the self-help business, and then the publishing of a book and going and talking about it around the world. And it was my mum who was seeing how stressed out I was by that, and I loved it, but it's overwhelming. And I think as a mum, there was a bit of her that was going, don't do that again, please. It's not a particularly healthy, balanced thing to do.
And
anyway,
what you were saying about just now about repeating patterns.
Yeah, that's true. And off I go again. So this is true. And that was, but I just have these little yearnings to try and figure out why am I like this with love? Why am I not in relationships when everyone around me is?
And what is this?
Yeah.
So what?
I don't know. It's just. I guess
saying I'm like this. What's this?
This is trying to find something out, trying to get an answer for something. So after money, it will, if I do have the energy to write about money, it's like, why am I like the way I am with money? What is money? Why is society how society is around money? We part envy these really rich people. We part despise them. We know rationally that really rich people are pretty miserable and unhealthy a lot of the time, and yet we still fetishize money. Like, there's so much of me that wants to get, why are we like this? Why am I like this? Why is the world like this? And then I just go off and try and figure it out, but also put myself through the mill in the process. And so that's the bit that my mum, I think, is really understandably, warning me against.
So what were you at the point you decided to write this book? Where were you in your love cycle?
Help Me had just come out, and during the self-help process, I was doing something called rejection therapy, where you had to get rejected by another human every single day, which of course was brutal and just grim. Like, I look back on it now, and as my friend Sarah in the book said, that's not self-help, that's self-harming. It was really full on. But in part of rejection therapy, I walked up to a guy in a coffee shop. I wrote about him in Help Me. And when the book came out, around the world, the question that people would come back to, they would ask about mum, and they would ask about that guy in the coffee shop who I called the Greek. And it was like, what happened to the Greek? What happened to the Greek? And Love Me starts with me going to see the Greek in Athens, where he lives, and it just bombing. He's not there at the airport to meet me. Various things that you can read about, that it just ends up, I had literally told the whole world that I was going off to see him, because for once I was so pleased that I just wasn't a single loser. I had this love story I could tell people about, and I could see people being happy about it. It was like I was playing into this role that I thought this person I thought I should be. The trip is not a success, and I come home, and that's when those questions start of like, why doesn't this ever work out? Is this something I'm doing wrong? Am I like default in some way, that there's all these issues around intimacy, or, fear of intimacy? Or is it that it's actually just not what I'm meant to be doing? Because so many other things have really gone my way in life. I've worked quite hard and I've really got the benefits of it. But when it came to love, it never did. And I actually, if I was honest, didn't really have the drive for it. I just felt like it was what I should be doing. And this is part of where the Love Me starts, is it's actually very hard to know what you really want versus what society tells you should want, because we are swimming in it. From the minute we're told, fairy tales and watch TV, it is almost impossible to know who you really are in all that. In society, we've all been conditioned in various ways. Yeah, so that's how it starts off in my cycle. After a romantic failure, me coming back to the flat, watching hours of Netflix serial killers, getting texts from my friends going, how did it go? Me being mortified, having to say it was a disaster. So, you don't want to be that friend where everything's a disaster. I wanted to have good news. But then a friend, then asked, are you heartbroken? And I wasn't at all. I was embarrassed. And I felt guilty that I'd sort of insisted on going to visit him, even though he had a load on, because I was so determined to play out this happy storyline. So I felt guilty I'd done that to him. But I wasn't at all heartbroken. It wasn't like deep down I really ever saw anything with him. I was just trying to go through the motions. So
you were like playing a role that you thought you should be playing.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a point in the book where you talk about rom-coms and how, always about getting the guy or the girl.
Always.
Not necessarily heterosexual, but it's still always about getting a partner.
It's romantic partnership in some way, isn't it?
And it made me think about, the montage. If you remember the montage at the end of 4 Weddings and a Funeral.
Yeah.
Where they're all, right at the end, the credits are rolling and everybody's in a couple. So Hugh Grant's been a rebel by not getting actually married. But everybody's in a couple. I can't remember her name, the actress with the ginger hair who died a long time
Oh,
ago.
yeah. I don't know
She's
what her
with the
name was.
Texans.
Yes.
Charlotte something. And Hugh Grant's from McDowell. And
I'd never thought of that.
Simon Cowell's partner
Yeah.
has got a new boyfriend.
Yeah.
Yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
And then there's Kristen Scott Thomas. And she's with a cardboard cutout of then Prince Charles.
Yes. Yeah.
But it
I'd
doesn't.
never thought of
but
that.
you're not laughing with her. It's like you're laughing at her. And I just felt when I was reading that, I just thought it's not. The narrative. I know that that's a really old film now, but the narrative is still that the single person is like
The butt of
loser.
jokes. Yeah. I think so. And I'm sure that will change and that we're in the process of that changing. But it's because I talk to younger people. I'm 46 now, so I'm always quite keen to talk to people in their 20s to find out, do they feel that same pressure? Because part of me thought, oh, maybe they just don't. But quite often when I speak to them, they're like, yeah, I do feel that pressure to be with somebody. Because I thought maybe they were in a more freer
Because
place
what
with
you
it.
see, I suppose what you see on the internet and TikTok is more outspoken. Like they talk about things that we didn't feel that we could talk about.
They definitely
like
do.
periods, and they're not trapped in the gender binary.
That's true.
And so, but it's really interesting that coupling up
That's
thing
exactly. And I think I saw the fact that they were able to talk about these things that I wasn't as a sign of probably much bigger changes than there actually maybe is.
What I'm trying to get to is the thing about your mum saying you should have been a nun because you're happy to being single, but singleness then equating to being no fun.
Well, it's not no fun, it's no sex. Also, so I never wanted to find love in this. I wanted to have good sex. So
when you started this, were you kind of at a point where you thought like, I need to find love? Or were you at a point where you thought, I need to find a way to be me, to be single and happy and being single my way?
Yeah. So I really didn't start this looking for love. Even that phrase makes me cringe.
Disgusting, isn't it?
It really makes me cringe. But no, it wasn't that. I was really trying to figure out, can you be happy single? Like genuinely, can you be happy single? Because almost everything around me seemed to suggest I was deluded to think that was true. And if, as a woman in, 40 at that point, 46 now, if I did stay single for the rest of my life, how could I build a life that didn't just fall into every sort of spinster stereotype? Like, how do you build a life that might not be in partnership, but does have loads of sex in it, that has loads of connection in it? I wanted to just literally figure out what would a good single life look like? Because Mum at one point joked that, I'd always make a good nun. And I put that in a quote at the beginning, because I really do like my own company. And especially if I'm reading and writing, I go off into my own world, which isn't so great for people when they're around me. When I've lived with friends, it's something they have to get used to, that when I'm working, I'm in my own little bubble. And I would kind of agree with her in some ways that I like the quietness and I like the routine, but I didn't want to be a nun and I wanted to have sex. So just because I didn't want a boyfriend or a husband didn't mean I wanted to be celibate. But I had sort of been living that way, because I think I had that sort of conditioning that for women, sex was mostly meant to be part of a relationship or something perhaps you kind of used on your way to a relationship. But this is also an Irish Catholic education where I think I had no sense of sex or sexuality being a beautiful thing for yourself. So I had lots and lots and lots of shame.
It's for procreation.
Yeah, or for getting a man or keeping a man happy. That was what I had in my head, I think. And so that was a big thing for me to try and figure out. I was really happy to be single. I still am really happy to be single. I wasn't happy being sexless. So I wanted to find out, how do you have a sex life that's not necessarily in a partnership and that it isn't some sort of one night stand hookup thing? Because I was terrified of that. I never really wanted to do all that. So yeah, the sexuality part was a big part of trying to step into a new way of being and living to the one that I'd been doing, which was always single for years with, odd relationships here and there, but I was mostly single. But I did know that I wanted a lot more than what I had.
So how did you shake off your Catholic schoolgirl?
To tantra retreats.
So happy you said that.
I actually, Sam, the first time I went was writing about it for Red.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
That was the first a PR for Jan Day Tantra, who I just wish everyone in the whole world genuinely could go to her workshops. The PR contacted me to say, would you be up for coming and writing about it? And I pitched it to your features editor. And so, yeah, that was the reason. So there you go. My sexual liberation is because of Red Magazine.
So tell me about, because I bet there are loads of people who are a bit like, I am actually quite interested in that, because a thing that comes up quite a lot, and I want to talk about later, is how there's a lot of kind of questioning and recalibrating of sexuality at this time of life. So I'm sure there are loads of people going, tell me more, stop talking and let her talk, which I'm going to do. So tell me all about the Tantra.
So first off, it's petrifying, like genuinely. So when this PR person first got in touch asking me to go, and I do realise it's such a privilege to get this kind of invite fall into your lap, my first response was no way, just absolutely no way, no way, no way. And then in life, I realised sometimes that the more my visceral reaction against something is often more a sign there's something there you need to look at. And so I did it. And it's just one of the most beautiful things I've ever done in my life. Really, truly. So Tantra,
detail.
I know. So the Tantra, I never really know what the definition of Tantra is. So like most of us obviously know that sort of idea of Sting having marathon lovemaking sessions. Do you remember that? He kind of made some quote about Tantra years ago. Basically, men and women in a room together, learning how to communicate with each other. And so a lot of it, not weirdly, maybe, is learning to say yes and no to things you want and don't want. And this is massive. It is massive. So you do these, like, you know, I've been reading the audiobook today and I'm so annoyed at how many scenes are in Love Me where I seem to be stroking someone's arms. Yeah. And I'm like, for God's sake, get over the arms. But, you know, you'll do something where you'll be partnered up with someone and they'll say, can I stroke your arm? You've got to feel into whether you actually want that person to stroke your arm or not. Now, it might be that you absolutely don't, but suddenly all your brain kicks into going to, but don't be rude. That will really hurt them. And don't be such a prude. Why couldn't, this simple request can prompt a whole world of responses that will make you go, yes. But deep down, it's not a yes, it's a no. And that then has such ramifications, well, for all our life and definitely for our sex life. Especially as women, I think we've been very conditioned to say yes to things we don't really want to say yes to because we're doing it to please the other person. And that's sort of fatal for intimacy. And not that I'm any expert in intimacy, but just seeing it in my own life. Once you start doing that, a bit of you checks out. You just have to, over the years, a bit of you will check out. This first Tantra retreat, a lot of that was about like resensitizing yourself to almost find out, what do I like? Because again, a lot of us don't even know what we like. You're so on automatic pilot trying to do what you think you're meant to be doing and what might make the other person happy. And so then, say you say no to this arm stroking. And I remember the first time I did say no, being absolutely paralysed with guilt that this bloke from Reading was going to be heartbroken because I said, no, you can't stroke my arm. And then you have these mortifying conversations afterwards where you talk about how that felt on either side. And I remember him saying, I said, I'm really sorry I said no. And he was like, why are you sorry? And I said, I don't know. I just, worried I hurt your feelings. And he said, no, it's really important you know how to say no, because that means that if we're ever in situations again, I know that I can trust what you're saying. Because it's also very hard on the other side. If someone's saying yes, yes, yes all the time, but you've got that slight feeling, I don't think they like this, but they keep saying yes to you, it actually ruins the whole dynamic.
We're trained.
And we are.
From a very young age.
We are.
To accommodate.
And that's the female condition. Accommodate, be nice, be selfless, and
be a good girl, don't make too much noise, don't make a fuss.
Yeah, don't mind me, doesn't matter, I'm easy, all that stuff.
Yes, oh my God, no worries. Oh my God, it will be on my gravestone, no worries.
So a lot of Tantra was actually not marathon lovemaking sessions at all. It's this learning how to say yes and no to each other, noticing how you feel. Say with me in the presence of a man, I noticed how much fear I have with men. Like real fear. I have fear of them rejecting me, fear of them thinking I'm not good enough. And because I'd been single for such a long time, I'd had this story that I was shit in bed and that I wasn't, good enough, and that everyone else were these amazing lovers and that I was the weirdo Catholic who was terrible. And so almost every time I was faced with a man, I had all these thoughts going through my head about all the judgments they might have of me. And that, I guess, is just good to notice because that's playing out in life all the time. And in these Tantra retreats, you are given so many opportunities to mortifyingly say all this stuff out loud. So I think you think blah, blah, and to just really share how you feel in the presence of the opposite sex. So that the Tantra that I was doing was kind of, it's quite a heterosexual environment. It's men and women. And there's Tantra such a broad field. So there will be queer Tantra and, all sorts of, the one I was in was quite a straight environment. And so it was just school. That's how she calls it. It's just like school for relationships, for communications, for getting to know what you like sexually. And, nobody ever teaches us these things. Communication and our relationships I think, are the sort of biggest factor in our happiness. And at no point do we ever get educated in how to have a difficult conversation. No one told me you're allowed to have needs. Like there's one point in the Tantra retreat where she asks, what do you need in a relationship? And I was so repulsed by the idea. It's like, well, I don't need anything in a relationship. I mean, I need food and oxygen and water, but that's all I need. I didn't know that we had emotional needs.
You
and actually,
else you weren't allowed
and
to.
I want doesn't get, which is a phrase from school. I want doesn't get.
Yeah. But also don't ask, don't get.
Lose. Well, I wasn't ever good at asking for things because I didn't even know what I wanted half the time. I was so busy trying to read everyone else for what I thought they wanted. And again, I wasn't really conscious I was doing that. It was just what I was doing.
And has that played out in relationships since? Trying to feed into what other people might want?
Yeah, I still do that, I think, but to a much, much, much lesser extent. And at least I catch myself when I'm doing it. I guess it's something that at least I'm aware of that now, whereas before I didn't know any of that was playing out. And so at one point, the Tantra teacher asks, when you're in the presence of another person, are you able to stay with your own experience? Like you here, are you able to stay with you and be with you, say, Sam, at the same time? So usually when I'm with someone, I am just so with the other person, I may as well be out of my body. I'm
I understand.
And ideally, you never abandon yourself like that. You're always kind of checking in. Am I enjoying this conversation? Do I actually really need to go to the toilet? Yeah. Those like really basic things of just like looking after yourself. So I'm still learning all that. It was important. You just sort of see these things about yourself that you hadn't seen. And I think probably it's a lifetime of creating those patterns. So it probably takes quite a while to unlearn them. But I also think that's a big part of being a woman in your 40s and 50s is that kind of transition where we're unlearning a lot of that pleasing behaviour.
Yeah, I think that is something that comes up like nearly every conversation I have. And I often wonder afterwards whether it's because I labour it, it's because I'm fascinated by it, so I always ask. But actually, I think not. I think it's something that, like you just mention it because it starts to be a bit of it's kind of a revelation. You reach this point, and I don't know whether it's to do with the biological imperative having popped off or
I think it probably is quite a part of that.
That must be a factor, mustn't it? That you suddenly start to think, well, what do I want in this situation? What does that look like? I mean, I've certainly talked loads about that sense that there are I kind of felt like I looked up and all the older women had gone. But that's kind of times 10 or times 100 in any situation outside the norm. So did you feel like that as a single woman in her 40s? There was, I hate the word role models.
But there wasn't a lot of examples, because that's part of the question at the beginning is like, what does a good single life look like? And it seems like such an old-fashioned question, but I actually didn't see examples of it. Partly through the book, I started to kind of seek out examples, and there are actually examples. So at the end, there's a few people I talk about. Cindy Gallop, who's this amazing, just absolutely amazing. I mean, she's a woman, I think she's in her 60s, British educated, but lives in New York, and
she was an ad exec, wasn't she?
She ran an advertising company, and one of her clients was a dating website at the time when dating websites were still quite new. And so she wanted to use this dating website in order to find out what it was about, in order to help shape the campaign. And through this dating website, she was a woman in her 40s. She put on a profile and found that she was getting approached by all these younger men. And so she'd go on dates with these guys and actually just had a great time. So she's now in her 60s, says she's single, says she wants to die alone, and she dates younger men recreationally and for sex. And that's literally what she says. And she says she talks about this not because she's trying to make anyone follow her way of life, but just so that women know there is so many ways to live. You know, they just are. And I was lucky enough to interview a woman called Anne Bowden, who started Starling Bank, who was also another utterly amazing woman, I think probably also in her 60s now, who just decided to start a bank. She was working for a traditional bank and just could see so much that was wrong with it. Again, she wanted to start a bank that you could do everything on your phone, that everything was written about so simply that even old people and young people could understand their finances. And extraordinarily, from a laptop in a coffee shop in Marylebone, she, after a few years, made it happen. And I was interviewing her about a book she's written. And I asked her about the fact she'd never got married or had children. And she said that it wasn't that she set out not wanting that to happen. It just never happened. And she believes in enjoying everything that has happened, you know,
rather than worrying what she might miss out.
And she thinks that women really are missing out on so much that's happening right now because of this idea we have of what life's meant to look like. She genuinely seemed like such a happy woman. You know, she said, I've met the most amazing people through work. I get up and I work every day and I love it and we're only just beginning. You know, she's a woman in her 60s who feels like she's only just beginning. I came off the call so exhilarated. And then there's Whoopi Goldberg, who I think's been married like 2 or 3 times and realised after number 3 that this was not for me. She lives alone. She doesn't want anyone living in her house. But she had this lovely thing when she said, but I have 3 soulmates. I just don't have sex with them.
That.
And so that was also a moment in the book where I think, you know, when someone asks you, are you seeing anyone? Yeah, I'm seeing lots of people and they're fabulous. Like, why doesn't a friend count as someone that you're seeing, or your sister, or this? And this is what I kind of think about, this idea of looking for love. It's such a strange concept because most of us, and not all of us, but a lot of us have love in our lives. We're so blessed. You know, if you have a family, if you have a friend, there is love there. And it seems really odd to go shopping for some new person to love when already the people in my life, I could do a much better job at loving them. And I know once you want kids, that's a different driver. And I do get that a couple can give you things that your circle of friends possibly doesn't. But I think most of us have people already in our lives that we can love and that we can receive love from. And it doesn't have to be some fictional tall, dark stranger who messes you around on Bumble. You know, it just, to me, it makes no sense.
It's like that notion though, isn't it? That it's recalibrating the one as the ones.
Yeah.
You know, a soulmate as soulmates.
Yeah.
You know, that it's...
Yeah. And aren't we lucky to have that? Like really, and again, I think, you know, the history of marriage is that it was primarily a financial union. It was how women had security. It had a really practical purpose. And I don't think historically, and I'm not an expert on the history of marriage, I've just read little bits about it. I think historically, we were not putting all this pressure on our partner to be our soulmate, our best friend, our career advisor. It wasn't. It was a really practical framework within which to have a family and raise a family. And you were very much within a community. So there were other people around you. And I think the way the world has gone with this romantic ideal, we put so much pressure on ourselves to find the one, then we find the one, and inevitably they disappoint us because they're just a human and not this saviour. And then we go, well, why isn't this working? And again, that's not always the case. I have friends who are really happily married and very wise and didn't seem to fall into those potholes. But I guess the more I research this book, the more I really understand why I was so confused all the time about everything, because we are getting all these messages constantly about what life is meant to look like. But the messages we get in this century are very different to the messages they got last century, which were very different to the messages the century before. So actually, we're all breaking our backs trying to fit into an ideal that's going to change in a few years anyway. Yeah. It's a made-up story. So, yeah, and I read somewhere that in China, the fairy tales don't feature love in their centre, they feature wealth. So wealth is the holy grail. And so you would have a completely different approach to life because of that. Isn't that interesting?
So interesting, isn't it? And if you think about it, marriage was a construct that, you know, was created centuries
Yeah.
ago, and yet we're still trying to crowbar everything into that construct.
Yeah. And for some people, I think it really works, that commitment and those promises. And I see with friends that are in what seem to me really healthy marriages, that experience of working through difficulties and still staying together. I think there must be huge security in that, a kind of security that I don't have. So I think marriage can give so much. And it's not the only place that we learn and grow or get support. I think we can do that in different ways.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, isn't it? We're told that you get support, security, be it emotional or financial, but you get it all in one place.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure.
Instead of all the other places.
Yeah.
So who are your soulmates?
I have a lot. I really, honestly, I did this meditation a few months ago at a Tantra retreat, and I got the giggles because I suddenly had this realization. I'm so loved, it's ridiculous. I'm so blessed, honestly, with friends and neighbours and my mum and my sisters, and I couldn't number how many soulmates I have. And I guess also that's the blessing as well of, I think, getting older, in that most of the people in my life are really the people I love being with, who love me properly. A friend said this on the phone the other day, that when you get to your 40s, and maybe this isn't true universally, but it's sort of true for me, I think, is the people that are left, when we've all got limited energy and busy lives, the people that are left are really the true friends, I think.
Can you tell us about replacing but with and?
Oh, yeah, that's such a good one, isn't it? So this is something that Jan, the Tantra teacher, said. She said that when we say but, so I love my body, but I worry I'm fat. She said, when you say but, you are all automatically negating what happened before the but. So as soon as you say, I love my body, but, it's almost like you've crossed out, I love my body. That's not true. And the focus is, I feel fat or I feel old. And she said, when you say and, it is much gentler, because two or more contradictory things can coexist. I love my body and I worry I'm old. I love my body and I wish I didn't have cellulite. I love my body and sometimes I criticize it. And it's such a lovely, soft feeling that you can allow it all. And I think that's quite a big part of Tantra. Again, we live in quite a binary world. You're either or, and you have to find your opinion and you have to stick with it. And of course, we've got so many contradictory feelings going on all the time, and that's human. So just allowing them all to be there. So I love being single, and sometimes I feel lonely. I have so many friends, and sometimes, I don't know, I have so many friends, and sometimes I feel lonely. You could be, I'm married and madly in love, and sometimes I feel lonely. And it's just nice. To me, it makes my body feel kind of quite calm when I say it.
It's when I read it, I just thought, I totally see how that one small thing changes the dynamic.
Yeah.
I am now going to ask you questions I always ask
at
the end.
Sure.
And there's so many more things I want to talk about, but you're just going to have to read the book. What is your emotional age?
32. I don't know. That was just what came.
It came out of your mouth.
32.
Where were you at 32?
Where was it? That was just what I was trying to think. I was working. Maybe that was that was the beginning of me being a freelance writer. So I used to work in newspapers, in offices in my 20s. And my early 30s was the first time I became freelance and started working from home, which is probably the beginning of the way life has gone for me. So maybe that's something to do with it. Yeah.
Maybe it's something like, maybe a therapist would think it's something to do with the first time you made a decision that was generated by what you wanted.
Maybe that's a really good point. Yeah. That's a really good point. Yeah. I'd say that's probably true. Nice one.
Give us a book recommendation.
Oh God, Viv Albertine, To Throw Away Unopened.
Why is that?
Because it is just brilliant. So it's about Viv Albertine was a punk in a band called The Slits, I think, unless I'm misremembering. And this book is about her mother dying while she's going through a divorce. And it's just so brilliantly honest about what she learned about being a woman from her mother, and the process of her building a new life in this new chapter, and the mother dying. And the way it's structured is very, very clever and sort of brisk. You just keep moving through it. And the honesty and the clarity, I think she's just an amazing writer. And I think that was one of the few books that when I read it, I went right back to the beginning straight away to read it again. Because I just think the writing is so good. It's so alive.
What advice would you give younger women?
Oh, I don't know. It's hard because whatever advice you'd give younger women, they won't listen. Like I wouldn't have listened to any advice I was given. You know, I'd have been told, just enjoy yourself and you can only do what you can do. So I suppose more than advice, I tend to like listening to younger women and encouraging them. A lot of the time, what we really need is just to be listened to with empathy.
Who's your old bird role model?
Oh, God, so many. I think the old birds are having all the fun.
Excellent.
I really do. I really do.
Really changed a lot.
Yeah, I really do. So there's Rose Rouse and Suzanne Noble run an organisation called Advantages of Age, and they've got a Substack and they've got a Facebook community. They are my favourite place to be on Facebook. It's a group of people, I'd say mostly 60s and beyond, and just the freedom they seem to have to live. You know, they have like these hot tub nights where they just meet in a hot tub and chat shit. Yes, there's such freedom. So yeah, I really admire Rose and Suzanne. Well, Cindy Gallop, I just think is amazing. And Bowden, who I mentioned. There's so many of them. Like, Sandra Rhodes, I became a bit obsessed with in lockdown as well. I kept watching videos of her on YouTube because, I mean, the actual colour of her, you know, because she's a fashion designer and she wears these vivid colours. But there's something about those people that keep energy up in life for that long, and she's still so passionate about everything. I find it really exciting. It's nice.
What's your superpower?
I'm about to say something, and I bet that there will be some people in my life going, fuck that, that's not true at all. Generally I would say that my superpower is listening and making people feel quite safe to be themselves in my company. And the listening thing is probably where my sister would go, you're a shit listener. But I'm actually, it's been something that's commented on a lot, and it's something I feel like I'm a good listener, and people respond to that. Yeah.
And last one, how many fucks did you give?
Annoyingly too many. Yeah, I do. I mean, less and less. And I've had long COVID on and off the last couple of years, and I actually think sort of a blessing of long COVID is sometimes that you don't have the ability to give any fucks, because I'm often so exhausted that I can't. When I have energy, I give lots of fucks. When I don't have energy, I don't.
You wrote something that just made me really want to punch the air, which is that sex is not a reward for being young and hot.
Yeah.
Do you really believe that now?
Yes. Oh my God, yes. Yeah.
Do you wish you'd believed that when you were young and hot? Not that you're not 40-something and hot.
Yeah.
But...
No. You can only learn what you learn and not before it. And maybe you only really can learn that when you stop being old and hot, or young and hot. Not that I ever thought I was young and hot, but of course now I can look back and go, oh, you were gorgeous. What were you on about? But, you know, you never felt that at the time, obviously. But now that I am sort of, you know, getting into older midlife territory, in some ways I can't tick those sorts of boxes. And yeah, I'm having the most beautiful sex that I've ever had in my life. So yes, it's not a reward for being young and hot. It's not a competition. It's a way of being with humans, and it's there for all of us.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoy The Shift and would like to show your appreciation, why not buy me a coffee? Go to www.buymeacoffee.com/The Shift with Sam Baker. You can hear a new episode of The Shift every Tuesday, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, please do rate, review, follow, tell your friends, because it really does help other people find us. And if you'd like to know more about my own experience of shifting, my book, The Shift, How I Lost and Found Myself After 40, and you can too, is out now in paperback.